this could be taken as a tangible sign of anxiety, malaise, unease in his ranks, and that certainly will be a theme, to be a fly on the wall as they gather today.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. CBC News dropped an article late yesterday that most people skipped over, but we wanted to share it with all of you because there are some significant points raised.
Let's take a look.
Liberal MPs voiced support for Trudeau after caucus members suggests a quote-unquote leadership review.
A number of Liberal MPs are saying they still have confidence in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau after one of their caucus colleagues publicly questioned whether he should lead the party into the next election. MP Ken McDonald, who represents the riding of Avalon in Newfoundland, recently told Radio Canada that he has heard from constituents who have expressed frustration or even quote-unquote hatred regarding Trudeau. He suggested the Liberal Party should hold a leadership review. Quote, as a party, let's clear the air, and if people are still intent on having the leader we have now, fine. But at least give people the opportunity to have their say in what they think the direction the party is going, he said.
The Liberal caucus is meeting in Ottawa ahead of the House of Commons' return from its winter break next week. A number of MPs and ministers told reporters on Parliament Hill that they still support Trudeau, despite McDonald's concerns. Liberal House Leader Steve McKinnon said he believes Trudeau maintains the support of his caucus. Quote, Mr. McDonald could not be more wrong about this one, end quote, he told reporters. Quote, we are going to get results for Canadians in the session of Parliament and the Prime Minister is the right man to be leading us through, end quote. While a number of MPs ignored reporters' questions about McDonald's comments, most members of Trudeau's cabinet, including Philomena Tassi, Pascal Saint-Onge, Rechi Valdez, Yara Sachs, and Mary Ng, expressed support for Trudeau. Yvonne Jones, one of McDonald's fellow Newfoundland and Labrador MPs, said McDonald's comments were quote-unquote disappointing. Quote, there's always going to be differences of opinion and issues, but the Liberal Party is the party that's grounded in values and principles for Canadians that I support, and because of that, I stand by the leader, end quote, she said. Jones said the Liberal government has done, quote-unquote, great work for her province, setting its financial backing for the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric project.
Quote, so am I disappointed in Ken? Yes, I am. Because there's days that as a politician, when you're representing your constituents, you don't always 100% agree with everything, but you work harder to change the result, end quote, she said. The Liberal Party doesn't technically have a leadership review mechanism built into its constitution. It does allow for, quote, leadership endorsement, quote, ballots, which allow registered Liberals to vote on whether they still support the current leader. Such votes occur only after the party loses a general election. Northwest Territories MP Michael McLeod said that while he still supports Trudeau, he would support the idea of the party having some sort of leadership review following an election, at least within caucus. Quote, I'm good with the Prime Minister running again. I'm good if he wants to stay, but I'm also open to the prospect of having a review, end quote, McLeod said. Quote, if there is people in our caucus that feel that there should be a review, I have no problem with that, end quote.
So there's a lot of really significant stuff in this article, even though it's quite short. I think number one is the fact that this has been published by the CBC.
Yeah, that's interesting. And number two is you have an example of the splintering going on in the party. Now, Ken McDonald, he's gone against the Liberals on some votes, but he hasn't outright questioned the Prime Minister and whether he should be the party leader. But that's changed. And the significant part here that I got from this is that he is questioning and wanting a leadership review only after his constituents are saying, Ken, we frickin' hate him. We don't want him. And that is basically telling Ken, if you don't try to do something, you're not getting reelected, Ken. So at least he's publicly showing his constituents, hey, I'm trying to do something here. So at this point, He doesn't care what the caucus thinks of him. He doesn't care what the Prime Minister thinks of him. He doesn't care about the Liberal Party. Who does he care about? He cares about Ken McDonald winning that seat again.
Well, and that's because Mr. McDonald's riding of Avalon is currently polling at 43% Conservative and only 40% Liberal. So he may be worried about his seat.
And this is even after he was able to be part of that little regime out east that influenced Trudeau to absolve them of the carbon tax until the next election.
Well, that's right, because if you guys recall, back in October, it was October 4th to be precise, McDonald voted with the Conservatives on their opposition motion to axe the carbon tax. And we had encouraged you all at that time to write Ken a thank you note just to say, hey, that was awesome that you went against what the Liberals wanted you to do so that you could do what's right for your constituents and for Canadians. In the next vote, he ended up voting with the Liberals. But point being, he's gone against Trudeau before. I wonder if he's going to have a seat in caucus come Monday morning.
So it's funny Fox said that. This is about almost exactly 12 hours after we recorded this video. And we did post it at around 11 a.m. this morning, which seemed to coincide with a story that also broke around the same time from CBC, that Mr. McDonald ended up walking back his his comments. And it's just funny. Like, this guy just seems to be the king of the flip-flop, but also it just seems very interesting that this story broke yesterday while the cabinet retreat's going on, a day after the disaster for the Liberals from the ruling that came down from the federal court from the Emergency Act. And now you have a MP saying that we should have a leadership review of the Liberal Party. Not a good week, to quote Justin Trudeau, for the Prime Minister of our nation. So we wanted to give you what actually broke this morning and the reaction of some of the other MPs, as well as our subsequent reaction to what has been a very crazy 12 hours.
MPs are meeting in Ottawa today to brainstorm party strategy before the House of Commons gets back to business on Monday. The Liberals are trailing the Conservatives in opinion polls. So is their leader, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. A Liberal MP from Newfoundland appears this morning to be walking back comments he made suggesting Trudeau should face a leadership review. Janice McGregor is live in Ottawa this hour. We're talking about MP Ken McDonald here, Janice. Remind us of what he said then and what he's saying now.
Good morning, Heather. Yeah, our colleague from Radio Canada, Laurence Martin, traveled actually to the Avalon Peninsula in southeastern Newfoundland to speak to Ken McDonald. This was very much an on-the-record, cameras rolling, full knowledge that this was a conversation with a journalist in some detail when these remarks were made. Our colleague wanted to talk to him in the aftermath of his vote last fall, where he voted with the Conservatives on a motion about the carbon tax, something he said that had his constituents shaking his hand, very pleased that he had accurately represented their deeply held views on this. He talked to Laurence about how there is, in his view, a hatred out there for Prime Minister Trudeau. He talked about also how every leader, everybody, every party has a best before date. He suggested that the Liberals' best before date might be here. And then he said this.
Normally, in most circumstances in politics, and especially in the federal government, if you go from a majority government to a minority government, there's supposed to be a leadership review. That hasn't happened.
So you think at least there should be a leadership review in the Liberals?
Yes, let's clear the air. Let's, as a party, let's clear the air, and if people are still intent on having the leader we have now, fine. but at least give people the opportunity to have their say of what they think the direction the party is going.
McDonald went on to say that sometimes a leader or party tries to hang on to power for too long and it hurts the outcome of the election. Some MPs arrived for a number of caucuses yesterday. As you mentioned, the Liberal caucus is also meeting today to get ready for the next winter sitting of the House of Commons. In the hallways, cabinet ministers on down, all very united behind Justin Trudeau, making it clear that Ken McDonald is speaking only for himself. And now, this morning, in the aftermath of that, we have a statement from McDonald. Not going to read the whole thing, but here's the key line. He says, "The intent of my recent public comments was not to personally call for a leadership review, and I am not calling for one now," he says. And he also said, as he said in the interview, he believes the Prime Minister is a smart politician, a great campaigner. He knows he still has the best interest of Canadians at heart. This statement stops short of confirming whether or not McDonald intends to run in Avalon in the next election. We will watch for what happens there. But I also want to say that in calling for a leadership review, you're kind of calling for a thing that isn't a thing in the Liberal Party. The Liberal caucus did not vote to give itself the powers that saw, for example, the Conservative caucus change leaders 2 years ago when they voted to remove Aaron O'Toole. They do not have that mechanism available to them if, in fact, a majority of Liberal MPs in the caucus did feel that way, and we have no signs that a majority does. Secondly, the Liberal Party itself does not have a mechanism between here and the next election for members to somehow, through a grassroots movement, replace their leader. In fact, they don't even have sort of traditional members anymore, period. They have a new structure now of supporters and so on. That changed before Justin Trudeau's leadership victory. So, this will not be a case where he is removed by others. It would be up to Justin Trudeau himself to decide to step down. And if we look at his year-end interviews, that is very much not how he is messaging. Nevertheless, this could be taken as a tangible sign of anxiety, malaise, unease in his ranks, and that certainly will be a theme, to be a fly on the wall as they gather today.
Isn't that significant?
That's interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. And it's very interesting that the quote-unquote statement that came out from McDonald does not reflect the way McDonald talks at all.
No, it doesn't seem to. He seems to be a little bit more casual than that. And as I pointed out in last night's recording for this video, McDonald, his seat is at risk. Right now, it's polling more towards the Conservatives. It could turn blue.
Yep. So
he could legitimately be concerned for his seat, for the future of the party. If you guys go back to our video on Tuesday this week, where we were discussing with Vesper what a dying brand looks like, the Liberals hit every single point, as he said. And, McDonald standing up, well, I don't even really know if you'd call it standing up, but him saying to the media that there should be a leadership review, and then less than 24 hours later issuing this statement that seems very cold and mechanical. It seems very suspicious to me, folks.
Well, if you go back and listen to what he said to the reporter when asked the question, do you think there should be a leadership review? It was an instant response. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And then to flip-flop like that immediately afterwards?
Well, we know what happened. So this broke yesterday, and Trudeau's office said, what the hell? And then got him on the phone and said, Ken, you can't do this, blah, 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 blah. Had a big conversation with him and said, okay, so Max Valiquette has drafted a statement and you're going to use that and yada, yada, yada. And here we are.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if Valiquette was behind this.
Yeah, that wasn't his statement. Like
that wasn't McDonald's statement.
Like you listen to him talk and then you read that. It's not the same guy.
No, it seemed very, very different. Now, some of us are different in the way we speak versus the way we write. But this just seems very off to me.
Yeah. So now we go to CTV, and they have poked around the retreat to see about getting reactions from other MPs on McDonald's statement. Let's see what they had to say.
Liberal MP Ken McDonald is backtracking on comments after he said the Prime Minister should face a leadership review. That was said during a Radio Canada interview. Now he's insisting he wasn't calling for a review. Liberal MPs were asked about this morning. Here's what they said.
When I saw it, my first thought was, if colleagues want to have that conversation, it's a conversation to have in caucus. I haven't been around because of the leadership race, so I'm not really sure how my colleagues feel, but I think that would be the first place to have a conversation like that.
MPs can, they are representing their ridings, they can talk about their constituents, they can talk about the issues which are important to them.
I think Ken McDonald realizes that working together as a team is what Canadians expect of us, and leadership means supporting Canadians and having vision for the future.
The Prime Minister is expected to address the Liberal caucus this afternoon.
Did you see that last MP's eyes? So as she was leaving, her eyes got really wide, and it was just like, thank you, get me out of here.
Yeah, this whole thing seems kind of manufactured, I guess you could call it.
Oh, 100%. I'll tell you exactly what happened, right? So this story broke, and Trudeau freaked out. His PR team freaked out, got McDonald on the phone, said, this isn't going to fly. You're not going to do this. We're going to draft a statement, and you're going to submit that tomorrow. And then they got on the phone with a bunch of specific people, not the frontliners in question period, not the frontliners in cabinet, and said, you're going to talk to the media tomorrow, and we're going to prepare some statements, and this is exactly what you're going to say. And it was so obvious that was the case for especially that last lady, who just said what she was supposed to say and then wanted to get the heck out of Dodge as fast as possible.
Yeah, it really seems like Trudeau and or Valaquette are just like cracking the whip and like, this is what you're going to say and you fall in line and this is how you act.
And this is typically what happens with a leader right before their fall, right? They are so desperate to hang on to what they have that they get, really ruthless. And, it works for a short period of time, but then you end up just really causing discontent for everybody to the point at which people say, you know what, enough is enough. Now, the other interesting thing is that there is no mechanism to remove him within the Liberal Party.
Well, and no doubt this is one of those things that, again, the left tends to do this. The right has a set of rules that have been followed for a long time. Like even in society, for example, no using narcotics in public parks, right? And the left comes along and goes, well, what's the harm in that? If people want to do it that way, then they should be allowed to do it. And then they take those rules away and then they discover the disaster, which I think is exactly what happened in the party maybe many moons ago with this policy. The right, so the Conservatives have this in their governing documents for their party. I believe the NDP has it as well, that they can call for a leadership review and remove an ineffective leader. The left is all feelings and well, why would we do that? We're sure that the person in power would have the best interests of the party at heart. And then they don't have this policy in their governing documents. And now look what's happening.
Yet at the same time, preach about democracy and how everybody needs to follow it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, they don't even have a mechanism to remove a terrible leader of their own party. And believe me, this is music to the ears of the opposition parties. Because the more this goes on and the more maniacal and egotistical Justin Trudeau gets in holding on to power, the worse it's going to be for the Liberal Party. Because sooner or later, and you started to see it with McDonald, he was dragged back in by Trudeau. But this is going to continue happening, and it's going to continue happening at a more rapid pace. If Trudeau continues along this path, he's just going to continue disenfranchising people. And McDonald, he has to go back and face his constituents to say, what the hell was that? We told you we don't like Trudeau. We hate him. And now you're saying he's a smart politician and a campaigner?
Well, and look at, Cypher just sent that email to every single MP who is currently sitting in the House of Commons. And no doubt McDonald or McDonald's staff has gotten that email and seen all of your stories about how Trudeau's policies are hurting everyday Canadians. That must be ringing at the back of his head. Look, these are real Canadians, real people who are struggling because of Justin Trudeau and his policies.
And they're all looking at you, the MPs that are representing them. And the fact that McDonald is flip-flopping like this, you think your lack of support is bad now, McDonald? Just you wait. Because all you've demonstrated to your constituents back home is they can't trust you to your word. And if they can't trust you to your word, then they have no use for you. Just like Canada has no use for Justin Trudeau.